Hi, I hope you're doing well. Now you're going to see C# loops, arrays, and collections. And if you want to learn more about programming, just hit the subscribe button. Okay, so here in our console test project, we are going to create an array of vehicles. So we have vehicle, and to create an array, we use brackets like this. And then we say vehicles. And then we can instantiate like this, which this used to be the way it was done, which was new, and then the type of the variable. This could be a string, an int, or whatever, but in this case it's an object. So we do new, and then the type, and then brackets, and then the body with the elements that this array should have. But the new way of doing this since .NET 8, which is now the recommended way of doing it, is just with simple brackets like this. And then inside here we are going to instantiate all the objects, all the vehicle objects that we want. So we're going to do new vehicle, and we are going to do our Kawasaki, and there we go. There is our vehicles. And now let's see some simple loops that we have in C#. So the first one, and pretty common loop, is the for loop. And in this for loop, we must pass a variable that is going to be used to interact with our array. It's pretty common to use an int, and this is the most common syntax. So it is int I equals 0, and while I is less than the vehicle's length, we are going to do an incrementation on yi. So here we declare and initialize the variable that is going to interact with our array. The second part of our loop is a condition that while it is true, this is going to keep looping. And then the third part is the operation that we are going to do with a variable that is interacting with our array. So we are doing a simple incrementation one by one here, but we could also do a +2, for example. And in this case, we are jumping one element, but for now we are going to keep the traditional way, which is this. Inside here, we are going to do something very simple. We are just going to console right line. We are going to say vehicles, and which is an array, and then to access one of its elements, we pass brackets, and then the position. So if we pass a literal like 0, and this is the starting point of every array in C#. So this is in the index 0, index 1, and 2, 3, and 4, and so on. And the length of this is 5. So you have index 0, index 1, index 2, 3, 4, and then the length is 5 because we have 5 elements, of course. So if you do vehicles 0, we are trying to get the first element, which is the Kawasaki. But in this case, we are going through the array and we want to see every brand. So you're going to pass a y dot brand. So what is basically going to happen here is we are going to initialize this I variable with a value of 0. While this is true, this code is going to run, and then we are going to increment every time. So y0, check if this is true, y++, but this is going to run afterwards. So I is still 0 here when this code runs. So what is going to happen here is that we are going to initialize this I variable with the value of 0. We are going to check if this is true and then increment. So when I is 0, we are going to do vehicles I0 and get the brand of the first vehicle. Then when this for loops end, it is going to increment, check the condition again, and see if 1 is less than the length, and then run the console write line again, and then it's going to increment, and then do it for 2, 3, and 4, and then it's going to increment again in 5, and then it is going to check if 5 is less than the vehicle length, which is 5. So it is going to check if 5 is less than 5, which is not true, and then it will stop running this loop. Now we can do the same thing backwards. So to do it backwards, we just change everything that we have here. So instead of having 0 here, we are going to have the vehicles dot length, and to get the last position of the array, we just do length -1, and this is going to get us the last position of the array. Instead of checking this, if it is less than the length, we are going to check if it is greater or equals to 0. And then we are going to do a I minus minus, because we are starting from the last position and we want to go to the first one. I'm going to put a line right here. And if you run this code, you can see that we get the same thing, just backwards, all the brands, one in the same order and the other one in the reverse order. So another type of loop that we have here on C# is the for each loop. And with for each, we are going to interact each element in the array. So the first thing that for each will provide us is the first element of the array. And it is going to provide us each element afterwards. So we can pass here vehicle and say vehicle in vehicles. And then we can do just this console write line vehicle brand. And this is pretty easy to read. What is going to happen here is just for each vehicle in the vehicles, do this block of code. If we run this again, you can see that we get the same thing as the first for loop. Now there are more too, which are while and do while, and we are going to make a good example here to try it out, and to also use the for and for each loop in a more, useful way. But before that, I just want to show you that there are other types of array. In C# they're called collections, and we have lists, we have IEnumerables, we have iQueryables. Groups are just, and they are just all collections of data. We also have a dictionary and a lot of built-in data types that .NET provide us to handle collections of objects. But the most common ones are list, so we can have a list of vehicles. Then we can use this same syntax with the brackets, which is the recommended. But before .NET 8, we would do a new list of vehicles, and then instantiate this list, and then instead of brackets, we would use braces like this. But you can see that we get a suggestion here to use the collection initialization. And in this case, we can also use a IEnumerable like this. And this is an interface, and this is a built-in interface of .NET. But to keep it simple, we can use list, and list is pretty cool because it has some built-in operations like add range, and also remove all, remove add, and the list class provides us a lot of useful methods to work with the array. So in order to make our example, I'm going to the vehicle class, and I'm going to add some properties here. I'm going to add a int fuel, and also a int kilometers per liter. Now once again, I'm going to overload the constructor. I'm going to remove the capacity here and use the third constructor that we have to do this for me, like this. And we are going to get a int fuel and int kilometers per liter, and yes, do this for me. And note that whenever we use the fuel or the kilometers per liter, there are no constructors that will take just one of them. If you want to instantiate a vehicle with fuel, you must pass how many kilometers does it do per liter. And if you want to pass how many kilometers does it do per liter, you also need to pass fuel. So there's no constructor that has an overload for each parameter. If you want to use one of them, you must pass both in this situation here. Okay, so I changed here a bit. I did a Mercedes, Fiat, BMW, GM, Honda, and Lexus. These are the maximum speeds, the capacity of each vehicle, the fuel of each of them. You can see that the BMW doesn't have any fuel, and how many kilometers each one of them can run per liter. So what we are going to do here is a race. We are going to race them. For that, we need a max race distance. And we are going to say they can run 100 kilometers, right? Just to test it out. Again, this is a vague project, it's just so you can understand the variables, the operations, ifs, the conditions, the loops, and later on we are going to do some real projects. So now the first thing that we are going to do is the do while. So we are going to do a bool can race. We're going to set this to true, and we are going to do something while they can race. We are going to race them while they can race. Now we are going to do a console write line because we want to ask the user how many kilometers are we running, okay? So insert the distance. The vehicles are going to race. Are going to race in kilometers. So insert the distance. The vehicles are going to race in kilometers because this is the real metric for distance. And we are going to say with a max of 100 kilometers. And we make this as a template string with a max race distance because we want to set some limits here. So now what we are going to do is get a int race distance, and we are going to int.parse a console.readline, and this operation will enable us to input some value in the terminal when we run this. So we are going to read this line, and you can see that we get a warning, and this is because we can have a null value here, but we can just pass an exclamation mark. And if we pass a string or a none, we pass a not a number here, this will give us an error. It's just going to throw an exception, so yeah, whatever. But if we pass an actual number, we need to test if the race distance that we passed is greater than the max distance. So if this is true, we want to say invalid distance, the race distance must be under, and then we can do a template string here again, like this. And now we need to make a for each in each vehicle to make them run. But before that, I just want to make clear that the use case for the do while is kind of rare, but you use do while whenever you need to execute the code at least once. In this case, we need to execute at least once because we want the user to input something here. So it needs to run at least once. And it needs to keep running as long as the vehicles can race. So here we are going to do a for each in each vehicle. I don't really like using var as the AI is suggesting here. I like to explicitly put the type of the variable just because it is easier to understand what is the type of the variable. Vehicle in vehicles. Now we are going to have a distance to run, which is the race distance that the user passed, and this distance to run belongs to each vehicle. Now we are going to write line, we're going to the console write line of the vehicle brand, just because we want to know which vehicle are we operating on. Now we are going to execute some code while the vehicle fuel is greater than 0 and the distance to run is greater than 0. And we do this because, if the vehicle fuel equals to 0, it means it can't run. And if the distance equals to 0, it means that we also don't have anything else to run. The race is over for this vehicle. So in order to calculate this, we are going to do a distance to run, and we are going to do a minus equal the vehicle dot kilometers per liter, and also decrement the fuel. So what is basically happening here is that we have a distance to run. In this case, let's say it's 100. We are going to take off this 100 the kilometers per liter. This minus here is the same thing as I did distance to run minus, and it even gives me a suggestion here to use compound assignment, and then you can see that this is the operation, and then we are decrementing 1 from the fuel. So for each liter of fuel that we are running that many kilometers per liter and taking that off of the distance to run, of the distance that this vehicle needs to run. And I forgot a tool here, distance to run. So if the distance to run is greater than 0, it means that this vehicle missed this many kilometers to finish the race. And if the distance to run equals 0 or less than 0, this vehicle finished the race with that many liters in the tank. Now you can see that, and this is basically all we need to make them run, this for each. But now we need to do something with this canRace bool variable, because it is set to true, and if we just live like this, they are going to keep running forever. This is never going to stop. So what we need to do is check if we have one of them that still has fuel. So if we have one vehicle that have fuel and all the others don't have any, it means that we have one winner, and with just one vehicle that we can't have a race. So to do that, we are going to make an int count equals 0, and then we are going to make a simple for here, and then we need to interact with the vehicle, with the vehicles array. And because we are using a list and not an array, we need to use count instead of length, because we don't have length in the list class. So we are going to use vehicles.count I++, and then once again AI is reading my mind here, and we need to check for each vehicle if we have fuel. So if we have fuel, we are going to count them as 1. Down here, we are going to check if the count is less than or equals 1. And in this case, they can no longer race. So canRace equals false. And I think this is pretty much everything that we need to run this program. And it is going to do this while this condition is true. We are going to ask the user to input the race distance. We are going to check if the race distance is greater than the max race distance that we set as a limit, then we are going to interact with our list and say for each vehicle we have this distance to run, and while they have fuel and there is distance to run, the race keeps going and they keep running, and we are taking 1 liter of the fuel and running this many kilometers per liter and taking it off from the distance to run, because we are running this many kilometers, we have less distance to run. And if the distance to run is greater than 0, we missed this many kilometers to finish the race. And if it equals to 0 or less than 0, we finish the race with this many liters in the tank. And down here we just count how many vehicles still have fuel. If we have more than one vehicle with fuel, we can still race. If we have 2 vehicles, we can still race. But if we have 1 or 0 vehicles, we can no longer race. So if we run this program here, it is going to ask us to insert the distance the vehicles are going to race with a max of 100 kilometers. So we are going to put 100. And if I make this bigger, you can see that the Mercedes finished the race with 24 liters in the tank. The Fiat finished the race. The BMW missed by 100 kilometers because we don't have fuel in the BMW. You can see here the fourth parameter is the liters that we have, the fuel that we have. The GM missed by 32 kilometers, and the Honda, the Lexus finished with 17 and 34 in the tank. We can make them race again. And you can see that Mercedes still has 18, Fiat 36. The GM missed by 100 kilometers because it doesn't have any more fuel. The Honda still have 9 liters. And we can keep racing them until one of them has no fuel. And one more. Then one more. And we still have 2, which is the Fiat and the Lexus. And in this next race, they're going to both finish. So you can see that the Fiat is the only one that Fiat got 1 liter in the tank, and Lexus missed by 28 kilometers. And because we have just one car with fuel, we can have a race. This is a pretty vague example, but it was just meant for us to use the while, if statement, for each force, and I hope the use case of them are clear and how to use them clear. But if you still have any questions, please drop them in the comments. I'm going to leave a link to this project in the description. You'll have the text to select what project do you want from these lessons. And that's it. Give it a like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.